In today's live case, Ish does a pretty masterful job at working through a very complicated problem. He asked for a lot of math and I delivered. It was exciting to watch him navigate through it, structure and restructure it, and to develop some proficiency in certain key areas, such as his creative brainstorming, but also still have room to grow. Especially pay attention to the feedback section at the end. We're gonna jump into our live case. It's time. So Ish, welcome. We're excited to have you and are excited to get to know a little bit more about you personally and also how you do in cases. So go ahead and walk us through a little bit of your background, why you're here today, and then we'll dive in.
Thanks, Jenny Ray. Hi, everyone. My name is Ish. I am a PhD student at the University of Michigan. I am very interested in transitioning into consulting after graduating. So I've been preparing for the past couple of months by doing a lot of practice cases. I've done about 30 cases so far, and I'm a huge fan of MC and MC's resources. So I listened a lot to the live cases that have been done before, and I just wanted to sign up and get publicly roasted by Jenny Ray. And what other better opportunity is there to get some practice?
Come on, I promise to deliver for you. Well, we're really excited to have you, and I'll just walk you through what we're going to do. I've prepared a case today that is, I think it's an MBB level case, but it is really about a business and a business question that you could also get in a company like Capital One or another financial services firm. This is a case that I will look for you to direct me through, but it does have enough rich quantitative information that sometimes I might have to kind of take back the reins, so don't be surprised by that. And finally, we have 35 minutes to complete the case. I will be timing you and I will provide my explicit feedback on both timing and performance at the end of the case. So if you're ready to get started, we'll go ahead.
Absolutely ready. Let's go.
Bring it on. Our client today is a company called Credit Card Master. In the last year, COVID has driven consumer spending, and in a related way, consumer credit balances up. The consumer spending was a surprise. Consumer credit balances not as much because there was more economic uncertainty. Our client, Credit Card Master, which is based on the East Coast in the United States, has faced strong competition from new credit cards that have entered the market in the last 2 years that have seen especially strong adoption. Our client offers own branded cards that are not affiliated, for example, with travel brands like Marriott or Delta, but that run primarily on the Visa network. And while primarily business travel has been all but wiped out, the sign-up bonuses for business co-branded cards have gotten even sweeter. They're basically throwing points at people to try to get them to sign up. So interestingly, our competitive cards, while we thought they may drop in adoption, they have not dropped as it originally predicted. While we offer an array of cards, we want to grow. Our company is considering dropping our $95 annual fee on its most popular card, which is a basic generic points earning card where you can redeem the points in multiple different places. And their focus is on becoming more competitive to enlist more people. What should it do and why?
All right, so just getting the last few pieces of information here. So sounds like a very interesting case of a credit card company. I'm very used to this problem because I have myself signed up for a lot of rewards credit cards during this pandemic. So just to make sure I got this case right, so our client is a credit card company, CCM, located in the East Coast, and they faced new competition from credit cards in the past couple of years. And particularly for their, they have a number of brands like travel and other brands, but they also have this business credit card, which has seen a decline because people aren't participating in business expenses. And they have this credit card, which is $95 annual fee, and they would like to cut out this fee in order to make it more attractive to people. So the question basically is, what should they do and why should they do that? Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Mm.
Okay, so a couple of clarifying questions. Are they only located in the East Coast, or are they more of a national brand like Bank of America or Chase?
Yeah, they're headquartered on the East Coast, but they are absolutely national. They issue
Okay.
everywhere.
Okay, and I want to learn more about their competitive response. What are the competitors doing that is making the competitors attractive? I guess we can go into this during the case itself, but perhaps maybe the competitors are offering no annual fee credit cards, perhaps they're offering more rewards. Just wanted to understand what the competition is doing here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're finding that the competition has multiple options, so we'll have to factor in the alternatives being quite diverse inside the case.
Okay, so I'm just gonna take a few moments to create a roadmap of this case,
Okay.
And then I'll get back to you.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
One of the biggest challenges with interview preparation for consulting is knowing what you don't know. And the best way to figure that out is to work with an expert coach. You can work with someone on our team for just one session where they can give you ideas for where you can build your prep, or you can work with them for 8 or more sessions to make sure that you're 100% ready for interview day. Check it out at managementconsulted.com.
All right, so in order to help our client solve this case of what they should do with their credit cards, I would like to look at 4 major buckets of information. First, I'd like to look at the financial information. So for financials, I'd like to look at the revenue that they're currently generating from credit cards, from the annual fee. That's number 1. And number 2, I'd like to look at what their quantity of customers are. And my hypothesis is that this is primarily a quantity-driven or a volume-driven business. So the number of customers really matter. Number 2, I'd like to look at their costs. Although my guess is that this is a fixed cost-driven business model, and they don't have particular costs associated with issuing new credit cards. And for that reason, we can look at perhaps ways to mitigate or cut their costs if needed. So the second major bucket that I'd like to look at is the customer interest in the product. And in this, I'd like to look at 2 major things. One is to look at the product features. So this would be the credit cards, what number of rewards are they offering, what other features, such as number of points, maybe some special features based on what is being purchased, things like that. And number 2, I'd like to look at the demand. And on the demand side, what do customers actually want in credit cards? Do they prefer 0 APR in the first year? Do they prefer low annual fees? Or do they prefer sign-up bonuses, things like that? Major bucket number 3, I'd like to look at the competition. So under competition, I'd like to look at 2 major things. So one is the number of different competitors. So how fragmented is this credit card market? I'm guessing that this is a fragmented market. There's a lot of credit cards out there. And number 2, I'd like to look at the incentives that are provided by the other competition. So incentives in the sense of price of the credit card, in terms of annual fees, rewards, etc. And lastly, in the last major bucket, I'd like to look at what they can actually do. Once we have these 3 pieces of information from the first 3 buckets. So preliminarily, there's 4 things that I can suggest. And as we go on the case, I'd like to develop more solid suggestions. But the 4 that pop up to me first is, one is based on number of rewards. So maybe diversifying the different types of rewards, not just offering rewards for gas miles, but also for air travel, and perhaps since during COVID, people are buying a lot of groceries, perhaps offering more groceries related rewards. Number two is offering more points per transaction. So this would be perhaps for groceries, offer 2 times the number of points. Number three would be to offer more brands. So instead of just a business credit card, it would also be a travel credit card, and maybe other forms, maybe based on gas or other niches that we can find. And fourth would be to get more custom credit cards based on people's needs. So I'm guessing that while people are at home, they're signing up for, they're spending money on other services such as PayPal and other financial services such as Robinhood or stock trading. So perhaps integrating this credit card with that. So yeah, that's basically my structure. I think we can start off with looking at the financials first, if you have any information. I think looking at the current revenues and the costs would be a good place to start.
I don't disagree, but I do have a question for you.
Yes.
We're ultimately going to have to make a call about whether or not to do this or not. What's your hypothesis?
I think my gut feeling is yes, we should do this. If we $95 annual fee does not seem like a large enough cut for me, in order we can still make back that revenue through other ways, perhaps increasing the interest rate by a few percent points on purchases. That would be one way. And number two would be to increase the credit card transaction fee per transaction would be another way. So I think my gut feeling is that this is doable.
Cool. That's helpful. So I want to dive into, you mentioned financials. I want to dive into the revenues a little bit more deeply. Okay. What are the different revenue sources that a credit card company like this one has?
Okay. So number one is the transaction fee. Transaction fee per transaction, the more the consumers spend, the more revenue they get. Number two is the annual fee that is obtained from per customer from the credit cards. That is number two source of revenue. Number three is the interest rate. So based on individuals who do not pay their credit card off on time, you can obtain a certain amount of interest based on that. So those are the three major revenue drivers I can think of.
Okay. Which one do you think is the largest?
I think credit card transaction fee is my gut feeling, because people do a lot of transactions in a regular day. People go about and buy a cup of coffee or something else. So they get a lot of transaction fees from that. That's my gut feeling.
Okay, good. So let's take a look at some information. What would you want to know next, Ish?
Yeah, I think I'd like to look at what this, since I think that transaction fees are the largest, I'd like to look at perhaps number of variables. One would be to look at what the percent rate charge per transaction is. And number two would be to look at the average consumer spending on the credit card.
Okay. Good. So let's take a look at let's take a look at the market first.
Okay.
At the volume of credit cards that are out there,
okay.
And then we'll come back to the transaction information. So I'd like to get a ballpark for the number of active credit cards in the U.S. currently. How would you size this market?
Okay. So. So what we can do is we can take the U.S. population to begin with, and I'm going to walk you through the process that I formulate. So we can take the U.S. population, we can divide this up into people who do use credit cards, let me back up 1 second, sorry about that. So U.S. population, and take people who spend money on goods and services. So this would be individuals who have finances. And then from this, we can look at people who prefer using credit cards. And that would give us a sizable estimate of the number of active credit cards in the US. So, so starting off with the US population, which would be 300 million people. And then off this, I'm guessing that people who are involved in finances would be people who are between the ages of, let's say, for simplicity, I'm just going to summarize that as people from the ages of 20 to 80, if we estimate a average life expectancy of 80. And so that gives us about 60 years divided by 80. So that would give us...
Let me pause you for just a second. I actually need more of the clarity on the structure, but I have data for you that I can help you plug in here.
Okay, awesome.
So so yeah, can you just walk me back through the structure piece?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the US population. From this, we would segment out the people who are involved in financial transactions. And then from that, we would segment that into people who use credit cards. That's this structure that I have.
Okay. Great. And so let me just walk me through each one of them and I'll give you the data if I've got it.
Okay, yeah. US population, 300 million, I'm guessing that's just an estimate. And then people who are involved in financial transactions. Do we have any data for that?
So are you talking about like, are you excluding children? Tell me what you mean by this. Are you excluding children?
Yeah.
Who are we talking about actually taking out?
Exactly, yeah. So we're excluding children from this. Okay. We are excluding teenagers as well, who are primarily rely on their parents for credit card transactions. I'm guessing that teenagers don't have their own credit cards. So I'm just rounded it up to 20. And then that's the starting of the range. And then the ending of the range is about 80. That's based on the life expectancy.
Okay. And so the way that we think about it is a little bit different. We just think about the removing basically adults with access to credit and then adults that want to use credit.
Right.
Right. And so I think you were kind of getting there in the same way. So we can match up on that. So we have about 250 million adults in the United States that have access to credit.
Okay.
What percentage would you estimate of those want to use credit instead of just being all cash, check, or debit focused?
Yeah.
Or simply or anti-credit for any other reason.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we are slowly moving into a world that is more reliant on credit, although we still have a major cash transaction. And then we also have people who use checks. And I don't think there's any exclusive, people are not exclusive on one or the other. But if I were to guess that credit is on one segment, and then individuals who use cash, checks, money orders, etc., is on another segment. So I would guess about 50% of the population is using credit.
Okay, you're low.
Oh, okay. Much more.
Everybody wants to spend faster.
Yeah.
80% is actually about the percentage of the adults that do use credit.
Okay, awesome. So if we take 80%, I'm just going to quickly size this. That would make us 0.8 times 40. So this would be about 200 million people who are using credit in the US. Are we just assuming that 200 million people are using only credit cards, or does this include, let's say, bank loans and other payday loans and other forms of credit as well?
Good. No, yeah. So that's credit cards specifically.
Okay.
So they might, that it's probably a good proxy for many of those other things, but those are specifically credit cards And
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so next what I would like to get into is the average transaction per year that an individual spends on a credit card.
I would like to get into that too, but I think there's one other thing that I want to think about here. So, so do you think we have the total number of credit cards in the US now, or is there something that's missing?
Oh yeah, so good suggestion. So 200 million is the number of people. So this may not translate into a number of credit cards. I know that for myself because I have more than one credit card. So I think if I were to guess, and I know I'm not the average person, so I have a couple, and then the average person I think is very wary of credit cards and only keeps one. So, and then there's also people who have one, but it's not active. Since the question asked, what are the active number of credit cards? If I were to guess, there would be 2 credit cards per person.
Yeah, that's about right. 2.2.
Okay, so that would mean that there is 440 million credit cards in the US.
Great. Okay, now you want to talk about transaction balances, huh?
Yes. Good.
I've actually got some more data about revenue more broadly. So you told me a couple of the types of revenue that you kind of thought about or recommended earlier. So let me give you some data so that we can kind of break down revenue components for the business.
Okay.
The one that you've asked about are the transaction fees. So we receive 1% of the transaction fees from retailers. We have to share that with other organizations like Visa, for example, and interchanges like First Data that process the transactions. And so the merchant pays more than that, but we make about 1%. And on average, consumers in the US spend about $10,000 in purchases per credit card per year.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
Have you ever heard a new digital trend and thought to yourself, okay, does this really matter? Asking the right questions helps you cut through the noise and get down to what matters most. I'm Jim Hertzfeld, host of the What If, So What podcast, where we discover what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real by asking what if, so what, and most importantly, now what? Subscribe and listen, and together we can turn big ideas into tangible actions so you can get shit done.
Okay. Sounds great. I just want to clarify, you mentioned it's Visa. What does that actually mean?
It means that that Visa is. I know a little too much about this, so let me make this simple. Visa is like a processing rail that is used. So Visa is the one that says like, yes, this is an authentic card that was issued, and then First Data is the one that says there's money in the account, and then the bank is the one that says we have the money, right? So there are kind of simplistically three parties that have to be a part of every credit card approval transaction, and we have to share with them the transaction fees. So that's why the 1% is lower than what the merchant has to pay.
Okay, so it sounds good. So if 1% is the money that we're making, and 10K is the average transaction per credit card per year, this means we're making $100 per year. And if I take the number of credit cards, which is 440 million, times 100, that would mean.
Now, we don't have to do that necessarily. Let's think about this. What we want to do is we want to actually figure out our revenue. So what's the data that we need for that?
Okay. So then we need, what we really need is, of this 440 million, what is the share that we have of the credit cards? 10%. Okay. So that would make it 44 million credit cards that we own. And so if we take now the 44 million credit cards that we have times the $100 of revenue that we get per credit card, this translates
is that our only kind of revenue?
Oh, yeah. So this is transaction fees only. And we can take into consideration other forms of revenue, like the percent interest. I'm guessing that off $10,000, not everyone incurs interest because a lot of the people are very good about paying off their credit card fees. And then there's also people who are not. So do you have data on that?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, so again, this could be a lot more complex. So for the purposes of the case, I'm going to keep it super simple. About 25% of our customers pay off their transactions monthly. 70% of our customers keep a balance. The average balance of those customers is about $1,000, and they accrue 18% annual interest rates, which that 70% segment will eventually pay. There's also an additional 5% of customers that make purchases that they will later default on the payment of. On average, that's about those are customers that have on average a balance of about 2,000 customers. So about 5% default on an annual basis.
Okay, so just to clarify the numbers, just to make sure I got them right. So 70% of our 44 million credit cards keep $1,000 of balance. And then 18% is the APR on that fee. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, and it's a little more complex than that, obviously, because there's compounding throughout the year. So
Okay,
we're gonna assume just a straight line 18%.
Okay, and then I'd like to also clarify the default. If I'm understanding this correctly, so 5% of our customers, you said about 2,000 customers. Is that right?
No, their average balance of that customer segment is about $2,000 when they default.
Okay, so by default, you actually mean this is a cost to the company.
Correct.
So we actually lose this money. Is that right? Okay. So, so what I can do is we already have our transaction revenue from transaction fees. We can calculate our revenue from the interest and then subtract out the cost from default. That would give us our net profit or before accounting for any other expenses. Is that right?
Okay. There's one other fee that we haven't talked about yet, though. And by the way, I'm ignoring late fees. I'm including those in the annual interest rates. They're not usually as significant as the annual interest rates are.
Yeah, so the other one would be the $95 annual fee, right? Yeah. So that would be applied across the board for all 44 million customers, is that right?
Yep, and then one final point of data, just to be clear, we're not looking at dropping that fee for all of our credit cards. So let me give you, these are the specs for this card that we're looking at, the one that has the $95 annual fee, and 40% of our cards are that card right now.
Okay, so not all 44 million experience this $95 fee, so only 40%.
Some of them have a higher fee, actually. Okay. Those we're not going to drop, so this is the one that we're looking at potentially dropping.
Okay, yeah. All right, so are we going to take those into account for this calculation, or just keeping into account the $95 only?
What do you mean? Are we going to take what into account?
Oh, sorry. The higher transaction fees for the other cards beyond this 40%.
No. Let's just look at this portfolio alone.
Okay.
You don't think you have enough to do, huh, Ish?
Lots to do. So let me get started before I get more confused. So let's start off with the transaction fees themselves. So transaction fees would be $100 per year per customer times 44 million customers. This amounts to $4.4 billion. Next, I'm going to calculate
Ish,
people.
I think if you're going to do this appropriately, do you want to do it on the whole pool?
Do I want to do this on the whole pool?
I think you should just include the transaction fees for the cards that we're looking at, not for our total population.
Okay, yeah. Okay, sounds good. So that helps narrow down the scope, and then we can look at, okay, what's the revenue that we lose from that 40% only.
Right.
So if we take 40% of 44 million, that would be about 18 million. I'm just going to round it up a little
Sounds
bit.
good. Yep.
So 18 million people, and then I'm going to use this as the standard from which we'll calculate the different fees. So transaction fees first, $100 per year times 18 million people. This results in $1.4 billion. Oh, sorry, $1.8 billion.
Okay.
Now taking the segment of interest fees. So this would be 70% of this 18 million. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. So 70% of 18 million. Okay, so that would be about 13 million. Can I round it up a little bit?
I'm okay with that. Yep.
Okay. So 13 million, and then they keep a balance of about $1,000, but only 18% of that is the annual interest. So that would mean $180 of interest per person. So if we take 13 million times the interest per year, 180. So that brings us to $7.2 billion. Is that right?
Fair. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Sorry, 7.2. Walk that back just a little bit more. How'd you get it?
So that is 13 million people. So 70% is that segment times the interest rate is 18%. So 18% times 1,000 is 180.
Okay.
And 180 times 13 million is 7.2.
Are you
billion.
sure? Just check that box.
Am I missing something here?
Yes.
Or is it 720 million?
What's 18 times 100 or 13 times 100?
13,000.
Mm-hmm. That 1.3 billion, and then another 80% on top of that.
Oh, okay. So that would be about 2.3.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. 2.3 billion. All right. So we're done with interest fees. Now we're looking at customers who default. So, actually, it might be better. Let me just cover all the revenues first, and then we'll go into the cost. Looking at the transaction, this would be the annual fees. So now the annual fees would be $95. And this is incurred by all 18 million of these people. So that would be, I'm just going to round it up to 100. Is that fine for this?
For the transaction fees?
Yeah. Sorry, the annual fee.
Oh, the annual fee. Oh, I already thought that you had done that. Sorry. Yeah. I thought that was what you had done before. So you did the transaction fees first.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. You can do that for the annual fees.
Okay. So that would be also 1.8 billion. And finally, looking at the cost of default, this would be 5% of customers So this would be if I take, this would be about 1 million customers. Is that right?
5% of the customers.
Yeah. So 1 million customers. And then $2,000 is the cost. So that would mean about, this is a large number of people. So that is about 20 billion. Is that right?
So 2,000 times a million?
Yeah.
You tell me.
That's what it sounds like.
What's 200 times a million?
That is 2 billion.
200 times a million? I think it's 200 million.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. So it is 2 billion. Yeah, I have issues with units, so that's all showing up now. Okay, so perfect. Now what we can do is we can add up all the revenues and we can subtract out the default fees. And then we can create a second scenario where we take only the transaction and the interest fees as the revenue, remove annual fees, and then see if we can cover the default.
Great. How would we cover the default?
How would we cover the default?
Yeah, how are we going to cover the default?
I mean, it's going to be a cut from the profits, right? So it's basically we're going to generate less profit because we are incurring that default fees, right?
Okay, dive in. Let's go.
So let me just do that calculation. So in the first scenario where we keep the annual fees, we're going to do 1.8 plus 2.3 plus 1.8. 5.9 is the total revenue in that case. And then in a second scenario, which is without the annual fees, the total revenue in this case is 4.1. So in both cases, we do make substantial revenue that is beyond the default.
Okay.
So this would basically be taking a cut in the annual fees, but we haven't accounted for other costs, number one. And number two, we haven't accounted for increase in customers that would result from removing the annual fees.
Great. Let's just think about the second one, because I do think that while the first is important, this is largely a question of whether we can compensate for that annual fee. So how would we compensate for it? How would you model it? Let me ask more specifically. What are the options that they have to make back the revenues that they might lose from dropping the fees?
Exactly. So number one is to increase the number of customers. Number two is to make customers spend more money, since that now that they don't have this annual fees, but I don't think that will affect the consumer decision as much. So I'm going to stick to number one, which is increasing the number of customers.
Okay. Anything else?
We can also look at ways to increase fees from other modalities, so increase transaction fees or increase interest fees. I think increasing both of those are likely, increasing transaction fees, since a lot of businesses are strapped and will likely pay that fee, so we can increase that. Or we can also increase it on the consumer side by raising the interest fees. Either are possible.
Okay, great. So I think that what we should think about is on a per unit basis.
Okay.
How many, like what we're going to lose from the fees, and how many customers we are going to need to add to make it back. I agree with you that I think more customers is the primary way. How many new customers do we have to get to pay back that droppage of the annual fee?
Okay, so we're losing about 1.8 million in revenue. So what we can do is we can see ways in which we can basically calculate the number of customers we would need to make back 1.8 if we consider that as the benchmark.
Sounds good.
So
just make 1.8 billion for me, Ish. Just do it.
Okay.
That's all I need you to do.
Easy. We can do this. So that would mean that we have to, we can consider the profit per customer. And so I can calculate the profit per customer using the model of, if we don't have, let's say, annual fees, let's say that is our total revenue of 4.1 billion minus 2 billion, which is the cost. That means 2.1 billion is the profit that we make from 18 million consumers. And so what we can do is we can calculate the profit per consumer. And in order to calculate the profit per consumer, I can take 2.1 billion divided by 18 million. And this would result in this would result in 18. Am I allowed to round up things and round down things so that I can make my life easier? So 2.1 billion to 2 billion and 18 million to 20 million.
So I don't mind the rounding. I'm just wondering if there's an even easier way you could think about it.
Okay. I'm trying to think if there is an easier way. I think I'm at a roadblock here.
Okay. Well, you've already figured out some of the numbers. You figured them out before, so I'm just wondering if we can refer back to those ish. If not, we can just recalc them. But basically, we've got how much we make on per person on interest on average. Right, and then the transaction on average, and then the loss on average. So I'm just trying to figure that out.
That's perfect. Thanks for the hint. So transaction fees is $100 per person. Interest fees is $180 per person, and then so those are the two revenues per person.
Yeah.
And then we'll just have to calculate the cost of default if we spread it out to the cost over all 18 million customers.
Okay. Let's think about it in a different way. If 5% of the members, the new people are going to default and lose us $2,000 a year on average, how much would we lose on average?
Yeah. Would you lose on average? Okay, so in that case, I think what we can do is we can
I'll give you a hint. What's 5% of 2,000?
It's 50.
I think it's close to 50.
500. Yeah.
It's not 500.
Okay.
What's 10% of 2,000?
200. Sorry, and
that's
then
okay.
$100.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So per person, we're going to lose 100.
Okay.
One more factor. We make 180 per year, but not on everybody, only on 70%. So we also have to factor that in.
Okay.
So we actually only on average make 70% of the 180 across all.
Yes. Okay, so 70% of that was the people who, by 70% you mean the interest rates, right?
For 70%, I mean, yeah, the ones that we're charging interest. So we don't make 180 for everybody because not everybody pays us interest. So we kind of have to do the same calculation. So it's 70% times 180.
Okay, so 70% of. So that is 130 approximately. So
great.
We can take 130. Okay, so this means that per person, the revenues that we have is $100 from transaction fees, 130 from interest, and then we can subtract out $100 from the default.
Great.
So that results in 130 of revenue per person. So.
Totally.
So we basically have to calculate the number of people that we need to bring in order to make 1.8 million. So that would be 1.8 equals to 130 times X, and we just need to figure out X. So 1.8 million divided by 130, and this results in another complicated math.
Let's see if we can make it simple. Oh, times 10 million. How many is that?
That is 18 million.
Yeah, but it would be 18 million. But timesing the 130 times 10 million gets us 1.3 billion, right?
Yeah.
So it's somewhere north of 10 million.
Okay.
But less than 20 million.
So
pick the midpoint-ish. Make it easy.
15.
Great. We just need to know relatively whether it's reasonable or not. Is it reasonable?
So that 15 million is a lot. So that's my, even if it's 10 million or 20 million, the other ends, it's a lot of people. And I doubt whether we can make this number of people in a short amount of time. So we would have other considerations, right? So number one is, can we get these number of people? Will there be sufficient number of individuals who either don't have credit cards or already have credit cards that would be willing to make the switch? Number two is considering the duration. So are we think of 15 million people within a year, within 2 years? And number three is this looks like a short term. We're thinking short term in terms of COVID only. What happens after COVID? We don't necessarily, do we keep up the annual fees or not? So given that, my instinct is this may not be a great idea, but I'd be happy to hear other possibilities or other things that the client is thinking about that we can take into consideration.
Sounds good. Well, we're ready for our final answer. What would be your final response and recommendation for this?
We'll be right back after this quick message.
Once you've mastered the case interview, there's still one thing standing between you and success on the job: Excel and PowerPoint mastery. I'm not talking about speed or the ability to write macros in Excel alone. I'm talking about the ability to intentionally think about how to use the programs to drive action inside an organization. We walk you through how to do that using skills and immersive exercises in our Excel and PowerPoint courses at managementconsultant.com.
So my final recommendation is for the client to not cut out the $95 annual fee. Reasons for this being, number one, we will not be able to make 15 million or obtain 15 million new customers in a short amount of time. Number two, the revenues, the profit lost from $95 is getting rid of $95 is about 1.8 billion, which is too high for us to compensate. And therefore, I'd like to look at other options that the client has in mind to increase customer attraction. That's basically the point here. And that would be to diversify their portfolio of credit cards, to do more advertising, to increase the knowledge of consumers about their brand, increasing brand perception. So yeah, that's my final recommendation.
Okay, I love it. Great job. Relax.
Thanks.
What do you think? How did it go?
I thought it was good. I was a little tripped up by all the math, but I'll need to work on the units especially. But other than that, I thought it was personally relatable because I'm a credit card fan. I'm not encouraging others to get credit cards like me, but I like credit cards for their bonus points and rewards. So I thought it was relatable.
Yeah, so this is kind of an example of why basically a lot of credit cards do the first year free option, because wiping out fees, the annual fee is wiping out, about a quarter, slightly over a quarter of their revenue and about a third of their profit. And it basically pays for the defaults on the card. So it's kind of a powerful exercise to go through to understand the decision-making behind why some of the orgs do it. So let me go back through the case. It took us 45 minutes. I let you go longer than I said that I would because I really wanted to finish it. And so I'm going to talk about how you could speed up, because there were a few things that you did really well, and then other things where I felt like you could have been a lot stronger. My number one takeaway was that I thought you were excellent on creative brainstorming, but I thought your structure, while very comprehensive, should have been more focused on exactly the problem at hand. I think had you spent a little bit more time really thinking about how you would have actually modeled this out, what this data was that you needed to gather, we could have gone deeper into that, less wide, and therefore been a lot more focused as we went through the math inside the case. And so I'll just get you started. So at the beginning, for your recap, I found you warm and relatable. You can start out, though, a little bit more aggressively, especially for MBB firms. So you want to just make it super punchy and very rapid at the beginning. So you might just want to increase the pace a little bit at the start. I know that you're targeting MBB, so I wanted you to know that. For your questions, I thought that they were really good questions, but they were what I would call level 2 instead of level 3 questions. So they were like, tell me about this instead of here's what I'm thinking, confirm it or not. Again, the punchier, more direct, stronger approach is going to work much better for MBB. Your recap was 45 seconds. Your questions were 1 minute and 13 seconds. Timing, really good. So I think just strength, demonstrating strength in those would start with a stronger impression. For your structure, I thought that there were 2 things that you did well and 2 things that you need to improve. So the things that you did well, first of all, you completed your structure within 1 minute and 15 seconds. It wasn't over long, yet it was very comprehensive. So I felt like you used your planning time extremely well. However, on the counterbalance to that, what you didn't do well, 4.5 minutes to deliver it, way too long. Okay. And that I think was representative of the fact that what was in there was more than you needed to solve this case. And so I felt like all of that extra stuff clouded the clarity that you actually demonstrated in a lot of other places in the case. So I would rather have a shorter, more deep, more numerical structure. What I thought you did really well was numbering. So you actually didn't tell me at the beginning how many categories you had, or I think you said you had 4, but you didn't tell me what the names were. And so I ended up with 5 and I have no idea. I wasn't actually following what you had on your paper, but you kept drawing me back by saying, okay, in the customer segment, I have 2 things. And then you would tell me like when you went on to number 2. So you used it to keep me with you, but you could have done even better if you had said there are 4 categories, here are the names. In this category, there are 2 things, and just kind of kept it like a little bit more simple for me to write down and follow. The final thing is that inside your structure, you started off with really good numbers, and then it faded into concepts. So if you had done the numbers, you could have identified, for example, one of the costs being the cost of defaults, or the cost of marketing, which we didn't really cover in the case. But you could have gotten more specific about actual costs and therefore driven us more toward the answer of the case. And you could have just told me at the end of this, like, this is going to be a really basic formula. We're going to remove fees. We need to increase revenue from other areas. So that's either going to be volume or it's going to be revenue per customer. And this is the way that we're going to do it. And then you could have told me directly after that what your hypothesis was, whether that was going to be possible or not. And so I felt like basically the comprehensiveness of your structure led to a lack of clarity in the answer, and that drove time into the case that you should have extracted out instead. Your creative was exemplary. Your creative brainstorming was really, really good. Each time I gave you a creative question, you came up with numbers, you elucidated on them, but you moved on fairly quickly. You prioritized which one you thought was helpful. I would spend 0 time practicing that from here on out because I don't think that you need help with it. When it came to the math, yes, the large calculations and the factoring, I think would be something that would be worth spending time on. Doing what I did verbally is totally permissible. Okay, 10 times that is this, and then another times 100, or right, you can what I think you should do is break things down into 2 steps or 3 steps instead of trying to do it all at once. When you were thinking about the math, I think that if you can really clearly separate out the structure of your math from the calculations of your math, you were very much like webbing those together, and it led us to kind of go down a little bit of a pathway and then back up again and then go back again. So if you could just be like, here's my structure, this is how I would do it. Do you have the data for that? No, I can make estimates, right? And then if I had the data, then I give you the data that I have, and then we can kind of very linearly walk through it. And so there was just a lot of dialogue and back and forth. The math part of your case was 10, 20, and 10 minutes. So like almost the entire case was spent on doing and undoing and doing again those math pieces. What I would do tactically is actually after this case, I would go back through exactly what we did. I would rewrite your math. I would try to keep your notes. At one point you were paging across pages. I would try to keep your notes both 2 pages in front of you so that you can keep track of those and really keep track of the difference between aggregating and on a per unit basis. So the more that you can get things on a per unit basis early and then aggregate up rather than starting with really big numbers for each one, the easier potential subsequent calculations are going to be inside the case. For your final recommendation, I thought it was good. I think that if we had a little bit more time, I would have wanted you to push in on the math as we were going through it into, okay, great, fees are a really big part of our revenue structure. Compensating for this with just revenue gains would mean really reducing defaults and or really a near doubling of interest rates to somewhere around 30%. I just can't even see that being politically feasible to get that done. And so, making some judgment calls, like interim judgment calls along the way would have helped you. But I think you need the clarity of your math first before you can push into it. What questions do you have for me?
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Jenny Ray, for going through that with me. Do you think in terms of the structure itself, I could have just stopped it at revenues and costs and not go any further than that? And
I actually think that there could have been another category, but in reality, measuring all these other things you demonstrated that it would have been really hard to measure them by the fact that you were for customers, what are the special features, and you were you got very intangible with that. So I would just really, I think you could have kept a competitor bucket, a customer bucket. One of the other buckets would have been very worthwhile to think about other factors other than just can we make more money? Because the how do we make more money through other channels is something that you could unpack in all those other ways. I just think that you lost the numerical nature of that. P.S. you can take a full 2 minutes to build your structure. You might have had more time. You might have needed less time to deliver it if you had had more time to build it more clearly like that.
Sounds good.
Anything else?
Trying to figure out, in terms of the math, I know getting to a per unit basis do you have any recommendations on how I should I know I was jumping between papers. Do you have any recommendations on how to lay it out on my paper itself?
Yeah. And I think tabling is always really good. Basically, this is a classic weighted average situation where we're saying, the weighting per customer is, this percent contributes 0, the people that pay off their cards, this percent contributes 70% of the 180, this percent contributes 5% of the negative 2,000. And if you can table all that out, then you're able to keep all of those numbers. So anytime you have segments or a weighted average like that, if you can keep it in a table, it's optimal.
Okay, yeah. I think one thing that I've seen repeatedly through my practice is I jumble both of them, like the calculation and the numbers that I obtain all in one place, and I should probably segment out my paper itself to put them in the right position so that I don't confuse myself.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, writing a little bit smaller or I try to use 2 total pages. And push it back a little bit further, so that I have plenty of real estate room in front of me, so I'm not kind of shuffling on the side. I think if you had more visibility into your notes, you might have experienced a little bit less confusion when we're driving toward those 2 pieces. Yeah. If this conversation with Ish led you to believe that you might need some help in your case interview, I would guess you're probably right. We'd love to help you at Management Consulted with a one-on-one session to evaluate where you are and where you need to go. You can book that at managementconsulted.com. In addition, if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode of Strategy Simplified, we'd love to have you. You can reach out to us at team@managementconsulted.com. And as always, if you'd like this podcast and share it, we'd be super grateful. Thanks so much.